All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. And thank you all so much for joining me for today's episode. It's a great episode. I'm excited for this episode. Here's why I'm excited about it. It's another audio question. So I know I mentioned this before. Okay, I'll go back for all the new folks out there who just found the pod. So if you're new to the podcast, it's a question and answer based podcast. You all got questions about OCD and anxiety disorders, how to work with it, what to do with it, how to help a friend with it, how to fix it for yourself, all those things, how to talk to a ridiculous therapist. We're ridiculous people. But how do you do all that stuff? Well, if you have questions, I got answers for you. Or at least I can yammer on about it for way too long. But you can go over to fearcastpodcast.com, send me in a question there. Now, there are two ways to do this, two brand new ways. One, the old way, is sending a kind of an email, go to the submit a question link, you type that in, I get it, I read it, I consider it, I likely will put it up in a future episode. But there's the new SpeakPipe option. You click on the little button there, you start recording into your computer box. That recording goes directly to me. I listen to it, consider it, and as I'm doing today, putting them up. And by the way, since I mentioned that a couple weeks ago, I got a bunch. I got like 4, which is great, which means like the next month is going to be audio questions, which is amazing. It's exciting. I think it's exciting. So today's going to be an audio question from Dan. So if you have an audio question, and by the way, the audio questions go to the tippity top of the list. They do get preferential treatment because it adds to it adds so much having your voice, not just me having to read the email. I will read the email. You know I will. But do you need to hear me read the email? And some of the longer emails, you know what I'm talking. All right, the old listeners know what I'm talking about. Point is, you can send them in. That's what's happening today. You can also go over to Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast over there. You can send me a question there. You can send me an audio question over there as well. By sending me a DM, y'all get the idea. So I'm excited for that. I love these audio questions. So today's question from Dan. I think it's a good question. So it's, I'll play the question here. It's a little bit about how do you know the difference between, what's OCD and your genuine interests? And we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a little bit of a twist and a caveat I'm going to throw in there for Dan and for anybody else listening who may be hearing these things, because these are those complications that happen with OCD. Unfortunately, OCD, as y'all know, can be complicated in finding its way and weaseling its way into a lot of different areas of life, and kind of masks as some things and pretends like it's something else, and makes a suggestion that the way to fix it is through this way, but the reality is it's over in that way. It's a big murky mess. And it's also, the trouble is, as y'all know, I'm hearing like 90 seconds of a question. I'm hearing a couple of paragraphs of a question. So, I miss things, and sometimes, I answer this and y'all will get back to me and say, hey, you answered it great, except you totally missed this whole thing. And I'm like, I totally did. But it's because I'm not psychic. And as I said, if, unfortunately therapists aren't psychic. And if I was, I probably wouldn't be a therapist. I'd probably be in Vegas. But, I don't gamble otherwise. All right, that was way too much. So I missed OCD week. I don't know if you did, but I did. I have this tendency to not put those things on my calendar, and then all of a sudden, all of Instagram is exploding with posts and things and lives, and there are other events happening, and I miss them because I'm doing other things. It's not a great excuse, but I'm so bad at those things. I don't know how I ever, show up for holidays or anything like that. It's bonkers. So there was like 1 year, a couple years ago, that I put it way in my calendar. I'm like, all right, I gave myself a couple reminders. I'm like, I'm going to do a bunch of things, and I did it, and it felt great. And I'm like, I'm going to do this again next year. And then I got distracted by something, and then I didn't do it. So for everybody out there who saw OCD Week and saw a bunch of posts and saw a bunch of encouragement and saw a bunch of validation and saw a bunch of yourself in a bunch of other people, that's amazing. And that's the whole point of all of it is to show that there is a whole universe, a whole community that is understanding, that knows what you're going through, that knows that thought, that knows that feel, that knows that worry that you are going through. And that not only are you seen, but that there is recovery to be found. So I'll just say that. I think it's wonderful, but I hope people found what they needed to found. All right, let's get into this. So I'm going to play Dan's question right now, and you'll hear me jump in just a moment. I'm cutting in, everybody. I forgot to mention a warning. This episode, we're going to be talking about sex. So if you are squeamish or uncomfortable, or if there are people who shouldn't be hearing it, cut it out. This is not the episode for you. No, okay, we'll get back to the thing.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for taking my question. I'm a longtime listener and first time submitting a question. So my question has to do with, do you have any strategies or suggestions on how to better distinguish between something that is OCD or compulsive when it can kind of disguise itself as your values? So I'll give you an example. So I struggle with relationship OCD. I tend to do a lot of compulsions related to assessing by my wife and I's sex life, how often we're having sex and whether or not she's attracted to me, and reassurance seeking. But I also value intimacy and see that as a really important part of a relationship. So I find that sometimes I get tricked into engaging in compulsions coming from a place of, it feels like it's coming from a place of my values. And so I tend to get tricked on that and feel really sort of like justified in my reassurance seeking or having long discussions about sex and our sex life and her not, doing enough. And then I kind of realize, okay, wait, I've fallen back into the cycle. So I guess my question is how to better hold myself to recognizing that this is coming from a place of anxiety versus my values. Thank you.
All right, welcome back. So Dan, thank you so much for that question. Great question, love it, awesome question. So, all right, I'm going to go over a little bit, just kind of some broad stuff here, and then I'll get into a little bit of your thing first. So, distinguishing between your values and OCD is tough. And what sucks even most is when, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, for any parents out there who are listening to this with their children in the room, I should have mentioned this in advance. We're going to be talking about sex. Dan mentioned it. All right, so I'm going to jump into that a little bit later. All right, so, all right, distinguishing between these two is kind of tough. But it happens. Sometimes, as we've talked about, OCD grabs onto the things that we value the most, right? So there can be this tremendous overlap sometimes when your hobbies or your interests or your values are incredibly important to you, as one would expect that they would be. But then what happens when OCD jumps in and tries to hijack it, tries to make it more or less or ultimate, and now it becomes this problem. There's this temptation that people have, and there are some other therapists out there, you know who you are, who are suggesting that, well, then the way to beat OCD is you have to let go of whatever that thing is. That drive that you have, that passion that you have, the career that you built for yourself, that faith that you cultivate and love. They say, like, the way to get rid of OCD is to get rid of that thing. I get where they're coming from. It's like, all right, if you're an alcoholic, well, you have to stop drinking. Okay, I guess, but what happens when you're a person of genuine faith? So here's some examples that you can think about and like where this would look, right? So let's say someone has religious scrupulosity, right? OCD about faith, but they're also a genuinely religious person, right? So maybe they want to become a pastor, a priest, an imam, or something like that. So they have to go to school for that, I suppose. Y'all go to school for that. So you go to school for that, but guess what they're going to be talking about and thinking about and challenging, and you're going to be asked to think about and ruminate on for hours and hours and hours in a bunch of different considerations is your faith. And how can one not think about this academically without it tapping into your individual faith, right? So that could be where OCD is going to latch onto it, right? And there's that overlap between one's OCD and one's genuine interest, right? Let's say someone's going into academia, right? but they also have perfection OCD, right? For someone who's in academia and there's a publish or perish mindset to keep their job, they're going to have to be writing grants and articles and all and peer reviews and all sorts of stuff. And perfectionism in that is kind of a requirement. Perfectionism can also be found, let's say, in some of the arts, right? In some of the more, maybe more traditional or I'll say traditional things like, think like opera or ballet, like they teach perfection. That's the idea, right? Classical music, right? All this stuff. That's going to be a problem. All right, other examples, let's say contamination obsessions. And let's say someone also just genuinely wants to eat healthy or minimize environmental contaminants, right? They don't want lead in their house and they want to use more natural products, right? But that can be overwhelming because it's tough, if not impossible, to avoid some of those other things. Other examples, just contamination and just like wanting a clean house, right? You can be someone who has a contamination obsession and also wants a clean house, but they fight with each other, right? My last example is having just right obsessions. And, let's say you're a musician and you want that like perfect tone, or like your hobby is making models or something like that. And you want to make it perfect, but just right gets in the way and says, not only does making this thing look perfect or, perfect, looking really good, is a desire, a goal, a value. Let's say you're making like a model. Have you seen like model trains, by the way? I went to this is a side note. I went to the train museum up in Sacramento a couple of months ago. And dude, there were some examples of some home like train things that people have donated. They are bonkers detailed. I'm talking hundreds of hours put into these that are, you look in a section and there's a whole story, and you look in another section, there's a whole story being played out. Anyways, lots of thought being put into it, but just right can come in there and just go, it's not right enough, or it's not perfection enough, right? So is the fix to let go of it, to abandon the thing that you like? I don't think it is. Okay. So some basic things that I would encourage people to think about in this, and I'm going to kind of do the gloss overview to get to Dan's question. One of the most important things to do in this process is to really know yourself and really know your obsessional cycle and what the triggers are. Not only triggers, but the signs that you're falling into rumination and your compulsive behaviors. Okay. Being really acutely aware of how they impact you when you start to do them, what that leads for you, like where that's going for you, and then also most importantly, the willingness to stop and what it takes to call yourself out for it and shift away. Okay. Why this is really important is because inevitably, as you're pursuing your hobby, your interest, that voice is going to show up. It's not perfect. It's not right. It's not enough. It's bad. It's offensive. Fill in the blank, right? It's whatever the thing is. So therefore, you have to now not just do it for joy, not just do it for interest, not just do it for pleasure, but now you have to do it, right? It's that classic have to versus get to, right? OCD tends to take things that are get tos and turns them into have tos, obligations, requirements. Hobbies and interests are not requirements and obligations. They are by definition get tos. We get to do those things, right? So a skill that's necessary for this process then is to be able to sit with the feeling of imperfection or incompleteness or wrongness, and to be able to focus on this feeling hard, right? This is going to be a big task for someone. By focus on it hard, I mean to be able to practice hardline cutting yourself in what you're doing, shifting your focus back to something else and saying, whatever it is that OCD says I have to do to fix this, or to do it right, or to do it perfectly, I'm not. Right? And that may mean for the person going through seminary and they have religious group that they're not going to read every book on a subject to fully understand it. Right? It means that the person in academia, they're not going to read through their grant proposal for the 18th time, right? And part of that is like finding that balance of what's good enough, right? Your brain will always say there's something more you can do. And the reality is there is always something more that we can do. There is. But or is it going to produce anything effective, or is it just going to be scratching that itch that y'all know OCD is going to come back like 30 seconds later and say, maybe you should maybe just do that again. Maybe do it again. There's a little bit more. You could do it again, right? You could do it better or clearer or faster or more precise, or you get the idea, right? So it's accepting that imperfection. And I was talking to someone earlier this week about this, that when we find this balance of like that kind of cleanliness perfection, or that hobby perfection. It's that we're doing something, but we're not doing it completely, but we're not doing nothing, right? It's this weird line where, and this is what OCD hates so much, is that it's not perfect, but it's not awful. It's just kind of there and kind of done. Now, this should be worked into, and talk to your therapist about this, and trying to experiment with what's enough. But again, sitting with whatever that yucky mucky feeling is that shows up when you don't do the thing and don't do it right. And then we ride through that feeling. We acknowledge that that feeling isn't the true alarm of danger that it suggests it is, but it's a suggestion that, hey, maybe you should do more and harder and longer and faster and more precise. And we're going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I did enough. I did something. And now I'm going to let this feeling pass. And then when a feeling passes, I'll get back to it, and I'll do it until that feeling shows up again. And then, I'm going to call it quits and say, maybe that's just my cue that I've had enough for the day, right? So I've had enough reading. I've had enough writing my grant proposal. I've had enough, evaluation, and to try to figure out which is the cleanest paint that someone could have in their house, and what is the exact and right amount of off-gassing that a product needs to have in order to not kill your family, or whatever the fear is, right? So that's kind of that idea, is we were saying, I'm putting my cap on this, and I'm going to let it go. And now I'm going to sit with the feeling, let that feeling subside, and also accept the risk that comes with it. Right. Okay. So there's a lot of other stuff that we can talk about with that. And I'll add to this. Certainly for folks in this process, not only are they practicing mindfulness and expansion of feeling the feeling, but also practicing like scripts, right? Where is the fear? What's the worry about this? What's the feared story that you have about not doing it perfectly? That the script is going to hopefully amp up that feeling to give you more opportunities to practice feeling uncomfortable, right? Think about it's like going to the gym, right? You lift the 5-pound weights, and that's great. And eventually you get to the point where the 5 pounds become fine. And then what do? To get stronger, we have to add more weights to it. So then you lift that, and it feels hard. It feels uncomfortable, right? But you stick at it, and you do more and more and more, and then you get stronger. And then at some point you go from the 10s and go to the 15s, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the idea of the scripts and doing further exposures, is to kind of add on to this. The act and expansion is to kind of get used to the reality that as you lift those heavy weights and do uncomfortable things, your body's going to feel uncomfortable and weird. So we're making space for the reality that we feel uncomfortable and weird, and knowing and being comfortable with discomfort, right? Okay, so Dan, this brings me to you. All right, so Dan, with everything you've heard me talk about this before, I'm assuming. We're always asking, what's the fear? If it's OCD, if it's anxiety, what's the fear involved with this? And it wasn't clear in your story, or in your question, about where the fear was. All right, you certainly said that you have ROCD, and you said you value intimacy. All right. So therefore, it sounds like compulsions then focus on the quality of the relationship. And more specifically, it sounds like the quality and maybe quantity of the sex that you and, I think, your wife or your girlfriend or your mistress, I don't know who it was, your partner was, you two are having, right? So that's where the focus was. But again, in order to work with this, you really need to think about, like, what is the fear? Because if we're practicing exposure and response prevention to the fear, to sit with and make space for the fear, then we need to know what the fear is related to. You've heard me say it before, and I'm sorry you're going to hear me say it a billion more times. OCD isn't really a thought problem, it's that feeling problem. It's going to suggest that it's going to suggest that the way you solve your intimacy concerns in this ROCD stuff is through having the right kind or the right frequency of sex in order to achieve intimacy. and then everything will be okay. Once you do that, it will move the goalpost. It will say you need to do more, different, better, stronger, faster, harder, whatever it is. It's going to have to be something else. It's never going to say you finally did it. You did it, Dan. You and the missus. You figured out the right sex to have, and now you never have to worry again. You intimacied. Mazel. It's never going to do that. It's going to say do more. Okay, so that's why it is not a thought problem and it is not a content of the obsession problem. It is a feeling that you get of not having blank, whatever that blank is for you. And Dan, you got to figure out that blank, right? Is it that you're afraid that this is all a sign that you're with the wrong partner? Is it that you're unloved or unlovable, right? You mentioned that you're worried that she doesn't love you. Is it that you're worried that you're not going to have real intimacy or connection in life, right? Which might leave you feeling like rejected or feeling alone in life. And I don't know what that thing is, but that is the feeling that you are going to need to learn to sit with and realize that that's going to be part of your story and part of the thing that you need to practice expansion into. It's an uncomfortable feeling that you don't like and that feels yucky or gross, but that's what's going to need to happen. Okay. So the some things to think about, like in order to like find that fear, you can ask like, what happens and what do you feel when you aren't having the amount or the quality of sex that you want? Okay. You can ask yourself like, well, how does it make you feel? How does it make you, Dan, feel when that's happening, right? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Is it anger? Is it loneliness? Is it rejection? Is it criticism or shame? Do you feel, do you feel afraid, right? What is the feeling that's going on with this, right? Because that's going to help guide this. And it made me wonder also, is sex then a compulsion? Okay. I'm wondering if sex in this is a compulsion, and certainly the conversation that you're having about it is to cover over for this bad feeling, right? Because I hear again you saying like I value intimacy, but it's my it's the thing that I'm focused on in my obsession, right? It made me also wonder then, is it just OCD or is it something else, right? I wonder then, and talk to your therapist about this. But again, I'm just somebody who you asked a question to, and it made me wonder some things, right? I wonder if the obsession is also driven perhaps by, an insecurity in using, sex and quote intimacy as personal validation. I wonder if there's a sense of feeling rejected or not feeling enough and not feeling, not feeling something. And so sex and intimacy is the way that you get around that, right? Another thing to consider in that is, well, what happens if it's just you and I think it's your spouse. I'm going to just choose that instead of constantly referencing the potential of it being your mistress, because you needed more things to obsess about. What happens if your sex drives just aren't lined up, right? What if you have a different quality or quantity of sex drive than she does, right? How do you and her find a way to move forward with that in a mutually beneficial and mutually agreeable fashion? And that's something that requires some conversation about, but it may leave you feeling that you're not getting enough, or that you're not getting exactly what you want all the time, that would satisfy whatever that feeling is. So therefore, if you're not getting what you want, then you're going to have to sit with and acknowledge and consider what that feeling means to you and what it means to then not have that satisfied, right? So is that an OCD story? Is that an OCD fear, or is that something else, right? Another question that I had is like, in what other ways do you seek intimacy, right? If you said that intimacy and connection is, something that you value, what other ways are you seeking that intimacy that has nothing to do with sex, right? And can you and if not, can you broaden your definition of sex to include, or no, excuse me, broaden your definition of intimacy to include other things that's not just sex, right? Turns out a lot of people are more interested in sex when they are feeling like they are wanted for something other than just sex, right? They are wanted for their character, their personality, or them just being a person and having mutually shared relationships or mutually shared experiences. And sex is part of that, but if it feels like that person is only there for sex, then they might not be as interested in that, as it turns out. So more things to consider, right? So again, Dan, I'm going to give you some homework, and I would love for you to think about this. So when that feeling shows up, I want you to note what that feeling and thoughts are when you're not getting the amount of quality and quantity and whatever of sex or intimacy that you want. Okay. What does it suggest is true is going to happen because of this, right? What do you want to do to try to fix this? Is it just sex? Is it something that she's not doing enough of, or she's not doing the right things of? I wonder in that, like, what is the necessity of her, right? Because that sounds like an accommodation that she's having to do this. Whereas, if it's a you thing, if it's a you anxiety, this is a feeling that you're going to have to sit with and not have enough of, right? Now, it doesn't mean then that you two are just simply never going to have sex again, and that's what's going to happen. It's saying you two are trying to find this like middle ground that's working for both of you. But as we talked about, it's this Goldilocks middle section where it's not perfect to what your anxiety wants, but it's certainly not nothing, right? But it's this feeling then of incompleteness, and that's a feeling that you have to practice sitting with and considering what that ultimately means for you, right? And then what happens when you make space for that feeling and you try to reconnect in ways other than sex, right? How does that feel? How does that work? How does that help answer that feeling? And can that help you kind of move through those times when it feels like you're not, like if sex is just the focus, right? For the record, I don't think I've said sex this much in a podcast episode ever. So this is a fun one for everyone. All right. What I'll also encourage you to do is to talk with a therapist about this. I'm hoping you're working with a therapist about this to help further unpack this and the nuances of this, right? This one's kind of a nuanced presentation of it. But you could consider talking with an attachment therapist. And what they're going to help do is to look at, like, what is the significance of sex and of intimacy for you, right? The goal for this is, and I know it feels like it's going to be ruminating upon ruminating, and this is like the struggle between this, right? Is to what degree is this just OCD, or to what degree is this a connection and relational thing? Because there can be both. My contention is ROCD is a combination of genuine relationship stuff responded to with obsessive and compulsive processes. Okay. So it's going to be a little bit of both. And there's going to be that discussion about the quality of the relationship and how you two connect and the significance of sex for you, and how can you pull back on compulsive means to dealing with it, because obviously they're not working very well. You could also consider working with, doing couples work with an OCD therapist, or doing couples therapy with an OCD informed therapist, right? Someone who knows about the OCD process. So they're going to keep that in mind. So they're not just treating, it as a only relationship issue, but we're also not treating it as an only OCD issue, because it may also have to do with attachment or misaligned sex drives, and that requires some conversation, right? Okay. All right. We talked about compulsion, or sex as a compulsion or accommodation. And yes, I think I've hit all my notes. So Dan, I went through a lot, and I hope this helps. All right. Because I know we went through a lot of information, but I think at the basis of it, when you're trying to differentiate between, is this an obsession that is OCD driven, or is this your values? I think a good red flag for all of us is this urgent? Do I have to do this right now? Do I have to have this conversation right now? Do I have to fix my sex life right now? Do I have to say that prayer right now? Do I have to build that model right now? Do I have to really just arrange those the people in the shipping yard just right so the train comes through and it tells the story about them shipping chickens to Nashua? I don't know. Whatever the thing is it a have to, or is it a get to? If it feels like a have to, that's where we put a pause on it and say, this is not for me. This is an obsession, and I'm going to take a break on this. I'm going to wait for this feeling to come down, but I'm going to note what that feeling is, where it is. And I'm going to acknowledge that this is the way my body and my brain feel for right now. And I'm going to allow that feeling to be there for as long as it is there until it passes. But during this time, maybe I'm going to try to connect with the missus. I'm going to go and have a chat with her about anything else other than sex, anything else that would answer or eliminate that bad feeling, right? Maybe it's just you're going to sit and watch TV again. Maybe it's that you're going to go and write some emails. You're going to go for a walk or a run, or you're going to learn to juggle or do cartwheels. I don't know what y'all do out there, but doing something other than eliminating that feeling or giving lip service to the feeling itself, right? Okay, and certainly not trying to fix it through the content. All right, you've heard me enough. Dan, I hope this was helpful to everybody else out there. I hope this answered a little bit of a question for you too. So until next time, everybody, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously.